Historical accuracy versus gameplay. Which one is more important and which one should get more attention from game designers? The topic is quite interesting, especially considering that we are going to use Battlefield 1 as a main example, and as we all know, this is the game that represents one of the biggest conflicts in all history. Sadly, I cannot say which conflict, because I'm gonna get instantly demonetized by YouTube. But we all know the deal. DICE had to recreate one of the biggest wars that has ever happened, and at the same time provide a gameplay experience that will be enjoyed by players. And this is very tough, because on one side they get gamers, like me for example, who just want a game that will be enjoyable and will be fun to play. We don't really pay that much of an attention to details of history, but we still want this game to somehow resemble the actual events. On the other side, however, there's a second group of players, the ones who want everything to be historically correct, they want everything to be perfect, and they just want one-to-one copy of the actual events that happened in the past. So then, when they decide to design the game and come up with new things, implement new stuff to it, they have to find this sweet spot to satisfy both groups of players and don't leave anyone out. In the previous games from the series, they didn't really have this problem, at least with Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 3, those games that I played. Because while, yes, those locations on the maps were real-life locations, and they resembled them, but they weren't one-to-one copy of them, and also, they didn't really need to do it. There wasn't any historical accuracy needed here, because those conflicts were mostly fictional. Let's be honest, we didn't have Chinese and US army fighting over a skyscraper in Shanghai. Those weren't actual events that needed some historical accuracy or correctness. They could technically do whatever they wanted to with the game, because, as they presented it, conflict took place in 2020, which was like 7 years into the future when the game was released. They had tons of room for modifications here. They could choose different weapons, they could choose different locations, they could take whichever location in the world they wanted to, because who would tell them that there won't be a conflict there in 2020? And with Battlefield 1, the story was completely different, because they were recreating the history which is known by, I'm not gonna say everyone in the world, but tons of people do know what actually happened. We also have to remember that Battlefield 1, DICE and EA, they didn't only have players looking at them. They had press, they had media, they had pretty much everyone around in gaming industry looking at their game when it was released, and they wanted to see, did they come through? Did they manage to actually recreate the whole war and the events that happened? You might not even be aware if you just play the game as a normal gamer, because why would you want to know this if you just play the game? But there were historians literally playing the game and judging if it correlates with the events from the past. And even if you don't like Battlefield 1, you have to admit, we all have to admit, that DICE did a great job, especially with the maps. Granted, some of them aren't perfect from the gaming standpoint. I'm looking at Galicia here, but we have to admit that when it comes to the design and recreating the real-life locations, I personally, when I saw the pictures of real-life places, I wasn't able to tell whether this is an in-game screenshot or an actual picture. I wish I could show you those, but all of those pictures are copyrighted and I can't really place them in the video, because then, if the guy who took them sees the video, he can easily copyright strike me and I'm gonna have problems then. When it comes to the weapons available to play in the game, there is quite a difference here, because while most of them were present during the war and they did actually play some role, because soldiers used them, some of them are just prototypes. and those prototypes were used once or twice or weren't even used at all during this time, and they started being used after the conflict has already ended. Personally, when I first heard about BF1 being in the WW1 setting, as I said, I can't say this because I'm gonna get demonetized, thanks YouTube. I really hope that for once we will get a Battlefield game that will be different and we won't have automatic weapons in it, considering that it was the time where those weren't really that present. As I said, there were prototypes, but then again, those weren't that popular. And what I'm trying to show here is that this is the point at which DICE had to go for this sweet spot that I mentioned at the beginning, between players who want gameplay and players who want historical accuracy. They could easily not go for the automatic weapons in this game. They could. And no one would say that they should have done this if they released the game with only self-loading, bolt actions and all of the other weapons that aren't fully automatic. And the same thing goes for some gadgets. For example, the new Pigeon gadget that will be implemented in the February update, where you get to fly in the Pigeon, take pictures with the camera which is attached to the Pigeon, and it spots enemies. I don't even want to go as far as saying that how can you remotely control a pigeon from the ground? You can't. But of course, it's a game and they wanted to implement a new gadget. They had to leave this historical accuracy behind and implement something for those guys who want enjoyable gameplay experience. Naturally, there's a lot more examples of that. Obviously I'm not gonna go through all of them because then the video would be like an hour long and you wouldn't watch it, let's be honest. But the overall point I'm trying to make here is that with game such as Battlefield 1, you cannot really go for either gameplay or historical accuracy. You have to go for both. And this might be actually the hardest thing that developers have to face while creating a new game. Even players who value gameplay more than the historical aspects in the game, they still want some of those historical things to be in the game and for the game to actually be somehow historically correct. They might not pay attention to 100% of those details and all of the stuff in the game, but they still don't want fictional events. And I'm looking at myself here, like, I don't really pay attention to all of the stuff in the game, I don't really mind that weapons are prototypes, or that some of them weren't even used back in the day, but still, if I play the game, which is focused on WW1, again, thanks YouTube, you're not gonna demonetize me this time, I still want to get this overall vibe that there were some battles that took place on those maps, in the real life locations of course, but still, I do want such aspects. And also, as I've mentioned throughout the video, Battlefield 1 was judged pretty much by everyone, not only gamers. With previous games in the series, DICE didn't really have this problem because only gamers were actually judging their games. And this time, with the biggest Battlefield release ever, they actually had everyone. Media, celebrities, literally everyone was involved in this game and everyone was giving their thoughts. If they made a game that wouldn't be historically accurate, but would appeal to players who want gameplay, and then media, all of those celebrities and generally people who can reach millions of people or even hundreds of thousands of people follow them, and they would say, alright, it's WW1 game, but it doesn't resemble it in any way. What is this? And then people who follow them would see such thing and they would decide that the game isn't even worth buying or even checking out. So the final answer to the question, what is more important, the historical accuracy or the good gameplay? I say that in a game like Battlefield 1, both of the things are important and both of those things have to work together. As I've mentioned earlier, it's not a problem with games such as Battlefield 4 because those games are totally fictional. And if someone criticizes DICE, they can easily say, hey, it's our game, We came up with it, it's our idea, it's not even supposed to resemble reality. How could it if it's placed in the future? Anyway guys, that would be it for this video. Give me your thoughts down in the comments, let me know what do you think. Do you prefer gameplay over the historical accuracy, or maybe it's completely the other way around and you want the historical aspect to go first? Write down the comment, and as always, if you enjoyed, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and I see you on the battlefield!